Hey, what's up everybody? Taylor with KC here, and today in this video, we're gonna be taking a look at our chase light that we offer here at KC. This video in particular is gonna be a full wiring guide, everything that you need to know about this chase bar. We're not gonna cover the installation specifics, we're gonna cover all of the wiring specifics for how to get this thing up and running, and we're gonna show off all the different modes that this thing has, and really get deep into the nitty-gritty on that stuff. So at the end of this video, we're also gonna do a frequently asked questions section where we just go over kind of a quick hit list of all those questions that we get for this chase bar. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right into this wiring guide. All right, so the first thing you're gonna wanna do when it comes to the chase light itself is get everything pulled out of the box and kind of get it separated into the various components here. Obviously we have our chase bar, and this has a nice cord coming out of the back of it that's already gonna have a zip tie on it. Just snip that because you're gonna wanna have a little bit more kind of wiring done here. Other parts that come in the box is our little controller, the control module here. And then there's two completely identical wiring pins that plug into the control module. So we're gonna use those in this video. And then obviously there's some nuts and bolts, some hardware for the chase bar itself. So I'm gonna set those aside. We don't need those for this one. Normally when you're gonna go ahead and do this, you'd already have your chase bar mounted onto whatever you're trying to mount it to, whether it's your Jeep or UTV or anything like that. Obviously for this video, we're doing a benchtop style. I have our power inverter right here on this side. That's what we're gonna be using to show off all these different modes that we have. So again, typically you'd already have this mounted, and now you're at that step for wiring, and that's what we're gonna cover here. So we've got our power inverter, that's what we're gonna be using. There's a couple other tools that we're gonna be needing. Obviously a good pair of side cutters or flush cutters if you have them. A good set of wire strippers is probably gonna come in handy at some point. And then a good crimper. You're definitely gonna be making some wire connections here, so crimper is always handy. Other kind of stuff that might be good to have around just to be prepared, wire tape, electrical tape, and some heat shrink. We also have a bunch of zip ties for later on when you go to do your wire management stuff. We have a little bit more heat shrink here, pre-cut stuff. And then we have a full kit here of all of our different little wiring terminals and connections here, from spade bits if you want to do those quick disconnects, or ring terminals, or just butt splices. So it's probably a good idea to have a bunch of this electrical stuff ready to go. This is a pretty involved electrical system here, so there's a lot of different wiring things that you're gonna be working on. All right, so there's two sets of wires that you need in order to kind of get this thing up and running. So I'm gonna just do a quick overview of what those two sets of wires are. Number one, you have the wiring end that comes out of the chase bar itself, and this is what it kind of looks like here. So you've got a bunch of wires that stick out on that side. Then number two is the control module side of things. So we've got our control module with two separate pin locations and two separate sets of wiring pins. These are completely identical. Right here, you have one side that is completely necessary, and that's the side on the left-hand side of the control module. The one on the right-hand side, this is optional. This set of pins from 13 to 28 is a little bit more functionality for the chase bar itself, but it is on the optional side. So you definitely have to use one of these wiring pins, but you don't have to use the second set if it's too much or if there's too many different modes for you. As a very high level overview, what we need to do is on the first bank, on the left bank of pins here on this control module, we need to connect the first four wires, which is positive, ground, A, and B. That's a red, a black, a green, and a white. The ultimate goal is to do that is to plug this in, connect red, white, black, and green from here to the red, white, black, and green from the wiring on our chase bar itself. So in order to do that, I personally feel like this right here is not quite enough wiring kind of showing right out of the box. So what I like to do is go ahead and strip this back roughly about 4 extra inches or so in order to give myself a little bit more room to play with those wires that I need to play with out of here. Then after that, you have the 4 wires that we're using, the red, the black, the green, and the white on our chase bar wiring harness right here. And the rest of these we do not need, so we can go ahead and snip those and kind of do some heat shrink and get them cleaned up. So now, this is our little insulated piece that we no longer need. This stuff is trash. And now we have a lot more room to play with our wires here. So this is really cool at this point. And what you wanna do here is you wanna pull out and separate your black wire, your red wire, and your completely white wire, and your green wire. So I'm colorblind, so I'm gonna have Jacob double check my work here. You can see there's a bunch of little strings holding this together, which is actually more just for keeping the thing nice and clean, or keeping it protected and strong. These are the only 4 wires that you need out of this whole bunch: the white, the red, the black, and the green. So these ones are really important to keep. This is what we're actually going to be connecting to our module here. The red obviously powers the main power for the light bar itself. Black is the ground for the whole light bar itself. And then the green and the white are 2 signal wires that send the signal from your control module here to the light bar itself. So what you'll do is clean this up and get rid of all the rest of these wires. These are kind of remnants from the old system of our Chase light before we had the control module with all those upgraded and extra different modes. So we don't need any of these. So really what I'm gonna do is snip the ends of these right off with my side cutters because they're just unnecessary. Make a giant mess all over the floor around me. And I'm just going to put a little bit of heat shrink around this thing right here and make it so that these are nice and protected and they're permanently out of the way, just because these are the only ones that you need. So now what you're left with after that is 4 wires that you are gonna be using. And again, this is out of the wire harness that comes out of the Chase bar itself. A bunch of little strings that I'm gonna cut off here. And then obviously a whole bunch of wires that you do not need. You can omit these, and these are tucked real nicely out of the way in heat shrink, and I'm gonna cut just a little bit of this end off, and then yeah, so we're good with that. So once again, those are the 4 that we need. We're gonna move on to the next step here. Next up is to take a look at our control module and grab one of the 2 sets of wiring for it. Again, they're identical, so it doesn't really matter which is which. And as you look at the control module itself, again, there's a left-hand side and a right-hand side. Plug your pin into the side with the A and the B and the plus on the minus in the top corner. It's also the side right underneath the logo. We're gonna work with the top 4 wires on the top left-hand side of this. So again, if you look at this, it's actually labeled in there too what these are. It will have a plus, a minus, an A, and a B. These are the 4 wires that we now want to connect to what we just prepped. The rest of these wires here, these are trigger wires in order to make the Chase light do something. Whether that's you only want the whites on, the ambers on, the reds on, or strobing, or something along those lines. These are the wires that do that. So these are what you're gonna connect to a different switch or a controller or something like that. And these are in order to make the light bar itself run. All right, so the first set of wires that we're gonna focus on combining here are the 2 red wires. This is the main power for the light bar itself. The light bar needs 2 different sources of power. So you have your one main power that activates or turns the whole light bar on or off. And then you have your secondary power modes, which are actually from these, which then tell it one of these modules to turn on or off. So in order to get the whole thing to work, you have to have reds with power. Now, you have 2 different options for what you can do with this. Number 1, you can just go right to the battery. Or number 2, you can go to a switch itself with a button on the switch that allows the whole thing to be able to be turned on or off whenever you want it to. If you decide to go with your reds and your blacks directly to the battery itself, just be aware that there is a 0.5 watt or a 0.04 amp draw, kind of a phantom amp draw from this controller and from the light bar itself. A half a watt really isn't that much. That's less than like the little LED indicator light for your alarm system in your vehicle, but just be aware of that, whatever you choose to do. If you wire it up to a switch itself, then you can completely turn it off whenever you want. So what we're gonna do for this video is I'm gonna take these 2 wires that we have here, combine these into one with a little bit of a longer lead on it, so that way I can be free to use the power inverters and the alligator clips that we have on our power inverter to be able to demonstrate all the different modes here on our Chase bar. So that's our first step. So now at this point, we have our connection made where I have taken the 2 reds together and extended my lead, so now this can go to a power source. We have gone ahead and combined the red from the module to the red on the light bar itself. We've combined the black on the module to the black on the light bar itself. and I have done an extension of those, so a 2-to-1 for myself. Just for the sake of this video, you can kind of see what that looks like here. Those two are done. Now the next thing that you are gonna wanna do when it comes to installing this onto your vehicle is take that A pin out of here and your B pin out of here, which is your green wire and your white wire, and connect those to the corresponding color on the light bar itself. So what we're gonna do is pretty much just butt splice these two together here. So you just need to go white to white, just like that, and green to green. Okay, so take a look at that. This is where we're at. We have now butt spliced or connected our green to our green, our white to our white, and our red to our red, and our black to our black. And really the only other step at this point would be to connect your red wire to your power source and your black wire to your ground. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. We're gonna do that over here on this side of the table on our power inverter. And at that point, we'll start to walk you through what these different wires do and what these different modes are that the Chase Bar can get to. So now that you have the entire Chase Bar wired up and pretty much ready to go in terms of the red, the black, the green, and the white, now is where you can take a look at all of the different wires that come inside of this module and with the pins for it. So what we're gonna do now is run through what all of the different modes are that this Chase light bar has as a part of it, so that way you can just see a real example of what these do, and then that will allow you to figure out if you want to wire these up or not. So each one of these individual wires that comes out of the little module and the pin, these are gonna go to individual switches or some other trick way of wiring them, kind of dependent on how you want to get that done. So what we're gonna do is run through each of these different functions and just kind of give you a real life example, and then talk you through what pin number this corresponds to and what wire color this corresponds to out of the control module itself. So starting with number 1, this is going to be the gray wire, let me get it connected here. So this is your tail light. It is a constant on, and this is at 50% brightness for those red tail lights. That's a gray wire, pin number 1. Pin number 2 is your white or your reverse lights. This is the brown wire. Obviously, this is gonna be really good if you're reversing, or if you are wiring it into the reverse circuit onto your vehicle. These are also actually a pretty good floodlight, so it gives you some nice lighting around camp too, so this is really good for that. Okay, moving on, pin number 3, this is your yellow wire. This is similar, but it's amber only, and it is constant on amber. Okay, pin number 4, this is a blue wire. This is alternating amber lights. So this is a really good mode for daytime visibility or marker light. So these, you could kind of call these a dust light. This is really good to make sure that people can see you on the trail. Those that are traveling behind you, this is a great marker light for something like that. Really good daytime or nighttime. So that's that first full top row of pins. Let's move on to this bottom row, starting with number 5, and that is the blue and white wire. This is your driver's side tail light. So this is only the one side of the light bar, and it is full brightness there. Okay, next up is pin number 6. This is your yellow and black wire. This is your driver's side white light. Okay. Pin number 7, this is your brown and your white wire. This is the passenger side white light. Real quick, I'm gonna take one step backwards, go back to that black and yellow wire. If you have the race version of this Chase light bar, it will have a blue module in this location instead. That's for best in the desert spec, legacy spec, things along those lines. This is what you would use to light up that blue module inside of the light bar itself. So again, that is pin number 6 with the yellow and black wire. Okay, moving on. Pin number 8, this is your gray and your white wire. This is just the tail light on the passenger side of the vehicle. Okay, next one over. Pin number 9, this is a black and white wire. This is both tail lights constant on full power brightness mode. Just to be aware, there are 2 black and white wires on the bottom of this. So this is obviously the first one at pin number 9. Next up, pin number 10. This is your green and your white wire. Obviously, this is your alternating white lights. Now, again, if you had the race light version, you're gonna have alternating white and alternating blue. Okay, now we're getting into the fun stuff here. This is pin number 11. This is also a black and white wire. This is more of a center out type mode. This is, again, really good if you have this light bar mounted during the daytime. You can have people directly behind you and they can see exactly where you are no matter what on the trail. Really good safety and visibility mode for this one here. Next up, I think honestly, this is my favorite one. This is pin number 12. So it is the final on this first bank of pins on your switch control module. It is the red and white wire. This is what we're calling kit mode. So for those of you who know who that is and what that is, here's your kit mode. Okay, so now that is that entire first set of pins here on the switch control module. So what I'm gonna do is we have a bunch more different circuits to go through. So I'm gonna plug this next one in, flip over my little handy dandy cheat sheet and show that off. All right, pin number 13. This is now the red wire. This is what we kind of call disco mode. This is the odds versus the even modules. They are alternating. Pretty cool. Moving on, pin number 14. This is your black wire. This is a great amber flasher. So think of these as kind of like the flashing lights onto your vehicle. This is pretty much all that does. It's a very constant flash, ambers only. Pin number 15 is what we're calling the unison strobe. It strobes real quick 3 times and then it pauses. So again, this is really good. Daytime or nighttime, people driving behind you, they can see exactly where you are, especially on higher speed vehicles, race trucks, UTVs, things along those lines. This will be a really good option for that. So that is pin number 15 with the green wire. Pin number 16 with the white wire. This is now very similar, but instead of flashing at the same time, they alternate and it is 3 at a time before it rotates to the next one. So 16, white wire. Okay, moving on, we're on to pin number 17. This is the gray wire along the top. Whoops. So now this is kind of an alternating flasher between your ambers and your whites, ambers and whites. Okay, pin number 18, brown wire. Very similar, pretty much the same as the last one, except instead of flashing, now these are in strobe mode. Yellow wire, pin number 19 at this point. This is now flashers, but instead of it being between ambers and whites, it is now between the ambers and reds. This is a really good mode for actually nighttime when you are driving at night and you want to use your chase bar as kind of a visibility marker light so people behind you can see where you're at. The white is pretty bright for those traveling behind you. It might blind them. The ambers and the reds are a little bit softer on the eyes, so this is a really good mode for nighttime travel. Again, this is pin number 19 with the yellow wire. Pin number 20 with the blue wire at first might look a little funky, but it is an SOS mode. So this will flash the SOS symbol, sign, whatever you call it. Moving on to the home stretch here, the last 8 wires along the bottom. We're gonna start with pin number 21. This is the blue and white wire. This is where just the taillights flash in unison. So this is another one of those really good for nighttime type modes. Moving on to the black and yellow wire, pin number 22. Alternating flash on the taillights. This is full brightness on tail mode. Now instead of flashing at the same time, now they are alternating. All right, moving on to pin number 23. This is the brown and white wire. This is actually a different demonstration set of lights that you can program to whatever function you'd like it to be. So if you look at your control module itself, there is a little button in the top right corner that says flash pattern. If you grab a little pin or something to press that little button, you can change the pattern that shows up when you press that button, and this wire will stay programmed for that. So once you have it nailed, once you have that flash pattern on the specific pattern that you would like it to be, you then simply connect it to whatever switch you have. So obviously there's a bunch of different ones. These are the full bore brightness modes. You can kind of go crazy with it if you really want to, from disco modes to strobe modes. You got flashers, all kinds of good stuff. My personal favorite out of this whole bunch, let me cycle through and find it. There are a total of 15 different preset flashing modes here, so it kind of takes a second to go through all these. So this is my personal favorite one. It is a 50% output mode. You can still see it is plenty bright, but what's great about this is it acts as a visibility or a marker light for those that are traveling behind you, and it would be perfect for use at night. During the day, this might not quite be bright enough, but at nighttime, this is gonna be plenty bright, and it's not gonna blind those that are trying to drive their vehicle behind you. So that's a really good option. So once again, that is pin number 23 with the brown and the white wire. The one immediately next to it is pin number 24 with a gray and white wire, and that is the exact same circumstance there, where you can program it to any number of 15 different functions. You just pick what you want, and then it'll stay that way pretty much until you press the button again. So moving on to pin number 25, this is the first of the black and white wires here. This is a constant on driver side amber light. This is at 50% brightness. Okay. Pin number 26, the gray and white wire, same thing, but on the other side of the vehicle. So this is the passenger side. Okay, pin number 27, this is your second black and white wire. This is a all on, starting from the left side, continuing to move right down the line. Okay. And finally, pin number 28, your red and white wire, is the exact same as that previous one, except it starts on the driver's side of the vehicle rather than the passenger side of the vehicle. Now, with these last two pins, let me get that back on. With these last two pins, it's important to take note that you can control or change the speed of these by clicking the flash pattern button. So there's two cycles. There's one cycle where it goes fast, and obviously on this one, it is fast and fast. Then you can press that button again. It'll change it to slow, and then the second cycle will be fast, just like that, and then back to slow. Then you press it one more time, and you're now on slow cycles for both of them, slow and slow. So that is pretty much all of the different options for the different functions when it comes to wiring up this chase bar. As you can tell, there are quite a few different options. There's 24 different modes that this chase bar has in total, so it's quite a few. You could quite literally run this to 24 separate individual switches if you wanted to do that. That's probably a little bit extreme, so you're probably gonna wanna pick any number of limited functions to use in your circumstance. So just to recap, now that we ran through all of the different functions that the chase bar can do, now it's really up to you and your application to pick which of those functions you want to utilize on your vehicle. So we did the whole rundown of all those. Obviously, as I mentioned before, there are a ton of different functions. So really you're going to want to fine tune that selection and start to use only those ones that are going to be applicable for you. Now, it's obviously going to be dependent on what you're installing it onto. But for example, if you're going to install this light bar onto a UTV, a side-by-side, I would really highly recommend just using an aftermarket switch panel, a switch controller. I've got the Phoenix one here. Switch Pros is another great option, things like that. That's going to allow you to pick a lot of these different modes and use it when you need to use it. You can also wire up on a momentary button. You can wire a left turn, a right turn, if in your state side-by-sides are street legal. So you can kind of do it a whole bunch of different ways. If you're going to install this system onto a Jeep, another off-road vehicle that you use as a daily driver, you can either do the same thing where you have a different combination of functions to a switch panel, or you can wire it up to individual press button, so that way you press the button to control whatever function you want, or you could use a combination of T-taps and wire extensions and T-taps into your left turn signal, your right turn signal, your reverse lights, things like that. Now, all the different vehicles are, they operate their electrical systems a little bit differently. I know for a fact on the Toyota Tacomas, if you tap into your front headlights, it's not going to work on your turn signals because it's a constant power. But if you tap into the rear taillights, then you can use your turn signal. So all of this stuff is really highly dependent on the vehicle itself that you're installing it to. So with that, just a reminder, all you have to do now that you know that, take your wire, butt splice it to whatever, or just plug it directly into your switch panel. Whatever you want to do, this is the point where you now connect these wires to your switches. So, okay, with that, now let's dive into some of the frequently asked questions. We reached out to our customer service team to kind of check out, hey, what are some of the questions that you guys get a lot about our Chase Bar? So we wanted to kind of run down the list here. I'm just gonna run down some of these. There's some that aren't quite applicable, but there's one that says, hey, what's the best way to run this wiring? Obviously, it depends on what your vehicle is. If it's in a UTV, I'd run it just right down the roll cage. If it's in a vehicle, you gotta find whatever's gonna work for your situation. How many switches do I need to use is the next question. Well, it depends. How many of these different functions do you wanna do? If you really only care about maybe a strobing amber and a kit mode, you really only need 2 switches. If you wanna have turn signals, if you wanna have white floodlights built in, you can do all that stuff, but each function takes another switch. So however many functions you wanna do is however many switches you're gonna need. Okay, is the light safe to use on the road? Yes, it is safe to use on the road. I will add in the disclaimer that during the daytime, totally safe, feel free to use this, but at night, some of these modes are pretty bright to use on the street. So I would be careful about what modes you're trying to use. Definitely, I would not recommend using one of these full strobing modes, the kit modes or anything like that. You will blind people behind you. You will get in trouble if you use certain modes, particularly those safety visibility marker modes. If you're using those on the street, probably wouldn't do that. But if it's just the turn signals, brake lights, tail lights, you can do that. Okay, what does the second set of pins do? Well, we already covered that. Those are pins 13 through 28, tons of different modes from there. And then how can you make the light strobe or flash? Well, as you saw, there's a bunch of different ways to make it strobe or flash. It's built into the wire itself and into the function. However, if there is still something after all these 20 plus functions that you just can't dial in, you can always wire it to a Switch Pros or a Phoenix controller, something like that, because a lot of the times these have built in the ability to strobe these lights. So if you couldn't find that, you can always do it with that as well. Okay, when should I use this light? Well, really there's 2 different scenarios. One of those scenarios that I would use is on the UTV right behind me. I would use that for people to be able to see exactly where you are on the trail, whether it's daytime or nighttime. The other couple sets of uses that we have on that UTV, that is a street legal vehicle, and here in Arizona, great state, we get to drive that thing on the road, but it doesn't have turn signals from the factory, from Polaris, so we wired this up, so you press the button and the left turn signal turns on, press another button, the right hand turn signal turns on. So that's a really good set of uses for that. And the third and final set of uses is that white flood mode. That's a really good way to use this Chase Bar. So with that, that's everything that you need to know for this wiring guide on the KC Chase Bar. If you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comment section below. I know that this giant bundle of wires is quite intimidating, so we hope that we did our best to break that down into this video, so that way when you get your Chase Bar and you open up that package, it's not quite so scary and intense when you see all that wiring. So once again, if you have questions, leave them below. We'll do our best to answer them. If you have something immediate, if you're in the garage and you need help right away, please call our customer service team. They handle questions from these things all day long, and they're more than equipped to help out with those. So with that, thank you so much for tuning in to this wiring guide for our Chase Bar. We hope that you found it useful, and yeah, adventure further.